The Ugly and the Beautiful by Waranavich. In a forgotten corner of a city where people passed by each other's wounds without the slightest tremble in their gaze, a little vagabond girl, like a grain of light in the filth-stained alleys, breathed her forsakenness into existence. No one ever called her name, and no one existed to give her one. She was alone, like a wisp of mist, left adrift among crumbling walls and stolen dreams. She was not born of darkness, yet from the very moment of her first newborn cry, darkness had taken her into its arms. She had no home, no roof, no mother to braid her hair or ease her fever with cool hands of compassion. The entire city had turned its back on her, and she, child of the trash heaps, with torn clothes and worn-out shoes, but a heart overflowing with kindness, wandered into the night's embrace, seeking morsels in the refuse to feed other hungry children. Whenever she found a crust of bread, she shared it with those even hungry than herself. And when winter's howls shrieked through the alleyways, she would wrap a piece of damp, ragged blanket around the shoulders of another child, and she herself would lean till dawn against a rotting wall in a corner with no shelter. She was an angel without wings, but risen from the soil, with eyes in which, should anyone dare to look, the sorrow of 1,000 souls could be seen in the depth of their darkness. For years, she lived like a shadow, silent, unseen, unloved. But the city, at last, dripped its venom into her. One night, when moonlight lay buried beneath blackened clouds, beings who seemed kind on the surface, but inside were rotted symbols of the demonic, devoured her in the swamp of false promises. Their smiles were bitter with poison. Their hands were traps, mirages of deceit. And she, that generous child, suddenly found herself imprisoned in the vile games of devils. She was taken to houses whose walls were swollen with the screams of silence. She was passed from hand to hand like a forsaken doll. Years of sorrow passed thus, and with every wound, she grew not weaker, but more steadfast. Her silence was more piercing than any cry. No one understood the dread hidden in her vacant gaze. Until one night, from the half-open window of one of those cursed houses, she flew, like a wounded bird, and vanished into the dark. With aching feet, a frail body, and a soul torn to shreds, she returned, not to a home she never had, but to the same garbage-laden alleys of her childhood, the same soil, the same wall, the same shadowed corner. But now, no strength remained. Fever, like a merciless fire, consumed her from within. She shivered among the damp, broken relics that now cradled her pain. Beneath mounds of waste, she lay down with a voice even she could no longer hear. She had fallen ill. A fierce fever had taken hold of her frail being. She could feel the shadow of death behind her and sighed bitterly. The world, unaware of her existence, continued to turn. Her head spun, her eyes dimmed, until she slipped into unconsciousness. Time passed. When she opened her eyes, a tall boy with a coarse face stood beside her, under a roof that resembled more the shelter of animals than a dwelling. A hand, like a miracle, had emerged from the darkness. A hand of light. A hand that sought not to take her to danger. The boy handed her a cup of hot tea and said, "My name is Arshia. You had a high fever. I couldn't take you to the hospital. I've been taking care of you here for 2 days." The girl, her strength barely returned, stirred slightly, and whispered with shame, "My name is Arnusha, and I don't know how to thank you for your kindness." The boy smiled, a smile that made his face even more homely, and said, "Your beautiful smile wipes away all my ugliness. It's worth far more than a thank you." And they both laughed, the ugly and the beautiful. The boy rose and said, "I'll go bring you some warm milk and soup. We live in a village near your city. My parents are farmers and shepherds. This place, where you are now, is a hut in the pasture, far from our home. I haven't told anyone that I brought you here, because I truly don't know who you are or what has happened to you." And while covering her with a blanket, he added, "Please rest. I'll be back with something for you to eat. You must be starving." An hour later, Arshia returned, quietly, with a bowl of warm soup and a vessel of milk. The fading light of dusk touched the pale cheeks of Arnusha, a girl in whom fever still slithered silently, like a fiery serpent. Her gaze fell upon the boy's face, ugly yet kind, with a gaze heavy, yet a heart full of light. And though she did not know why, her heart was at peace. Days passed. The girl came back to life, not into a safe home, but into the sudden kindness of a stranger. And when Arshia realized that she had no one in the world, he brought her to his parents. The simple-hearted villagers, first with caution and wonder, and then with open arms, welcomed her into their home, and then into their hearts. Arnusha, with a sincerity born of soil and suffering, shone like a lamp in their humble home. She kneaded flour and baked bread, milked the livestock in the pasture, cooked meals with Arshia's mother, and with her smile, lit a sun in the cottage warmer than any spring. She was no longer a lost vagabond, but a daughter of that household. Years raced past, and through the stretch of time, Arshia's heart, silent and hidden, blazed more fiercely with every day. He was in love, wordless, unassuming. He kept his love buried like fire under ash. He dared not speak it aloud, perhaps fearing that if he did, Arnusha might flee, like a bird abandoning its nest. But the appointed day came. Every 3 months, Arshia had to go to the city to buy necessities for their home, spending a few days away before returning. And so it was that he prepared for the journey and departed. That very evening, by cruel coincidence, a family from the village came to ask for Arnusha's hand in marriage, and Arshia's parents, who saw her as their daughter, agreed, unaware of their son's heart, brimming with love, yet silent and sealed. The engagement was set for a few days later. And when the day arrived, the bride was dressed in simple white cotton, a red rose tucked into her braid, and sent to the groom's house. And that same evening, Arshia returned from the city. The house was still full of guests. His mother, joyful, offered him a plate of sweets and said, "My dear, Arnusha married and left. Our daughter is now happy." And then everything froze. Time halted. The boy was trapped in the moment. Voices turned to bitter echoes. The ground shifted beneath Arsha's feet, and without a word, he collapsed like a tree whose roots had been torn from the earth. In panic, the guests rushed to summon the village healer. The healer came without delay, took his pulse, washed his face with a damp cloth, until at last Arsha opened his eyes. But he was no longer the same boy. His manner, his gaze had changed. He had fallen silent. He no longer spoke. His eyes sunken and dim. His lips closed and mute. He had gone mad. His eyes no longer belonged to this world. He was captive to a phantom named love, and to fate, who had driven a dagger into his heart. Months passed. No one, not even his parents, understood what stirred within him, except the village healer. Until one day, Arnusha came to visit Arsha's family alongside her husband. There she saw, for the first time, the boy's condition, withered, silent, sunken in a shadowed corner. Something within her trembled and rose, but she did not know what or why. Arnusha and her husband stayed 2 nights. On the 3rd day, she bid farewell to her adoptive parents and returned to the village with her husband. A week later, on a gloomy evening, her husband said to her, "I know Arsha was not your blood brother. Would you care to tell me what he truly meant to you?" Arnusha, astonished by the question, asked, "What sort of question is that? Has something happened?" He replied, "No, but I cannot understand why Arsha had your name tattooed on his back, just above his heart. I saw it while helping his father wash his body. 2 hearts inked side by side, and beneath them, your name, Arnusha." The girl froze. Everything came crashing back, like a searing lightning bolt through her mind. Those glances, those silences, those quiet acts of care, all now stood before her, like shards of a shattered mirror. Her breath caught in her throat. She stood up and said, "I have now understood a truth that has poisoned my blood and burned my soul in bitterness. I no longer belong to you, nor to anyone else. I no longer belong even to myself." And she told him her story, all of it, without omission, of garbage, of hunger, of cold nights, and the miracle that saved her. Then she said, "You are a good man, but I cannot remain with you. My heart, long before I knew it, had already belonged to another, one whose heart was greater than mine. Forgive me. Let me go. Build a better life for yourself." And without hesitation, on that same evening, she left her husband's home. Through the dusty village lanes, she walked with longing toward Arcia's house. She stood in the doorway and wept. Arcia's parents looked upon her in astonishment. With a knot in her throat, she said to them, "I have come to stay. I have come to care for him, your son. I have come to atone for the ignorance that cast its shadow upon you and upon him. Arcia loved me, and through your unknowing, you wronged us both." And once more, she wept, bitterly. They, through tears of their own, told her, "He is not here. You must go. Go to the place where when you first opened your eyes, you saw him." Without delay, Arnusha hurried toward the pasture hut and opened its door. Arcia lay asleep on a straw mat. She woke him and laid his head upon her chest. And in that moment, time pulsed within the two of them. That night, under a full moon shining over the village sky, the ugly and the beautiful lay side by side in silence. He, mad with the bondage of love. She, alive in the blaze of awakening. Perhaps fate cannot heal two wounded souls, but love, even if late, shall always reveal its truth and find its rightful path.